name is Ting Chak. I'm the Asia co-coordinator of Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, and it's really my honor to chair today's webinar. Today's event is co-hosted not only by the Tricontinental Asia, but also the International People's Assembly. And we're gathered on a very important day, April the 30th, which is the anniversary of the liberation of Vietnam. And 51 years ago today, we saw the images of a tank crashing through the gates of the Independence Palace of Saigon, ending 3 decades of war. Vietnam had defeated, and the Vietnamese people had defeated the most powerful military in the world. And that victory, of course, did not come easy. It came at a cost of over 3 million Vietnamese lives and the devastation of an entire region. But it did prove something that we still carry with us today, and that's the organized struggle of a people can prevail against even the mightiest of empire. And so we are launching this webinar today on this anniversary because the threat that the Vietnamese people fought against has not gone away. Today, the United States, under its hyper-imperialist phase, maintains an arc of military infrastructure stretching from Japan to South Korea and to the Philippines, Guam, Australia, to Diego Garcia and the Gulf states. And Japan, we've seen, has doubled its military budget to recently and purchased over 400 U.S. Tomahawk missiles in the largest remilitarization since the end of the World Anti-Fascist War in 1945. In Taiwan, we've seen the U.S. sell over $20 billion worth of arms since 2019. And of course, the illegal Israel and U.S. war on Iran has proven in blood that for the neighboring countries, Gulf countries, the U.S. military presence does not mean protection for any of the peoples in the region, and that having a U.S. base is not a shield, but in fact a target. And of course, we're seeing also in West Asia, the U.S.-backed genocide in Gaza well into its 3rd year. But it's important to remember that the peoples of Asia, we have not stayed silent, and we have a deep and long tradition of resisting militarism. In 1952, during the Korean War, over 470 delegates from nearly 50 countries actually gathered here and based in Beijing to demand an end to U.S. bases and the rearmament of Japan. In Okinawa, we've seen farmers and women resisting literally bayonets and bulldozers against U.S. land seizures since the 1950s. The Pacific Islanders built the nuclear-free and independent Pacific movement that linked the struggle against nuclear contamination to the demand for national sovereignty. And of course, in the Philippines in the 1990s, there was an important struggle to vote against and kick out the U.S. military bases. And of course, a process that is now being reversed as new bases are operating and being built in the Philippines. So today, this webinar is hosted, as I said, by the International People's Assembly, or the IPA, as it launches its Hands Off Asia campaign, an international campaign that calls for the removal of U.S. and NATO military bases from Asia, for an end to these aggressive military pacts in our region, and ultimately for respect of the sovereignty of the Asian peoples and nations. And we have an extraordinary all-women panel joining us across this region today, because we know that women have been at the heart and at the forefront of the struggle against war and militarism in our region's history. We have the history of the Women's International Democratic Federation. We have, the Sun Qingling, who chaired that 1952 Asia Pacific Peace Conference. We have the women and mothers of Okinawa. We have women basically leading the struggle really across the 20th century and beyond. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. We have 6 speakers today, and each will have 10 minutes, and then we can engage in some question and answers. So first, of course, we begin today in Vietnam on this anniversary. Our first speaker is Luna Nguyen, a translator and Marxist-Leninist content creator based in Vietnam and known to many of you through her YouTube channel, Luna Oi. And she brings the perspective of a young Vietnamese voice carrying forward this legacy of liberation struggle in today's moment. And so she'll speak about the liberation struggle in Vietnam and its lessons today for the anti-war movement. So please go ahead, Luna.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I am Luna, a Marxist-Leninist translator and a content creator from Vietnam. It is an honor for me to be here today, right on our very special day of the, of the celebration of the liberation of Vietnam and the reunification of our people too. So, yeah, let me start my speech today. Okay. 51 years ago on this day, April 30, 1975, marked the great victory of Vietnam's communist forces in the resistance war against the imperialist USA. From 1965 to 1972, the USA sent nearly 3 million troops to Vietnam. At the end of the war, over 2 million Vietnamese civilians and over 1 million of Vietnamese soldiers had died in the conflict. The brutality and inhumanity of the United States against the people of Vietnam is legendary and will still suffer the consequences to this day. There are over 4 million Asian origin victims in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, a crime which the USA has still never apologized for. The United States has not only built a sprawling network of military bases which span the globe through military invasion and armed conflict, it has primarily built up these military bases through soft power and economic pressure and diplomatic manipulation. And Vietnam today is threatened far more by the soft power of the Western Empire than by threat of military invasion. This year, the Communist Party of Vietnam officially declared that foreign diplomacy is equally as important as military defense for our national security. We all know too well that USA and its allies and puppets do not need to shoot a gun or launch missiles to interfere with a sovereign nation. Just as effective as bullets and bombs are tariffs and sanctions and fomenting unrest through clandestine counter-revolution activity. Even though the war ended in 1975, the struggle against US imperialism continues to this day. Right after the war, the United States imposed severe sanctions on Vietnam, and we became economically isolated, especially as the Soviet Union began to weaken and eventually collapse. At that time, Vietnam was devastated by the war. Our civil infrastructure and industry had been bombed into non-existence, and we could not trade with most other nations. By the late 1980s, Vietnam was on the verge of nationwide famine. Millions of lives were at stake, and our only strong allies, the USSR, was no longer in a position to help. For all these reasons, in 1986, Vietnam developed the program of đổi mới, which means renovation. In order to secure money from the IMF, Vietnam allowed privatization and the development of a market economy. It was during this time that the US stepped up economic intervention and sabotage against Vietnam. And this has been the primary weapon which Western imperialism has leveled against my people ever since to this day. In order to normalize relations with the USA, Vietnam had to agree to pay off the huge load of debt which had been accrued by the fascist puppet regime which had occupied the South of Vietnam until 1975. We had to pay millions of dollars to the United States to compensate them for the very money and weapons which were used to massacre Vietnamese civilians during the war. Vietnam had no choice but accept the terms of the empire. We had to agree to pay $145 million US to the USA. It took us over 20 years to pay off that debt. So Vietnam was paying an unjust war debt to the USA until just 7 years ago. I hope that this gives you some idea of the kinds of gangster tactics the United States uses against Vietnam. And this is only one of the countless other examples. In addition to such economic attacks, the USA has also been building up its soft power to sabotage Vietnam politically. The USA spent billions of dollars both openly and covertly to back NGOs and news outlets such as USAID, Human Rights Watch, Radio Free Asia, Voice of America, and so on, to spread misinformation about Vietnam and stir up counter-revolution inside Vietnam. Vietnam is hardly the only nation to suffer from such political intervention. We all know the trend of counter-revolutions in Asia and Eastern Europe in the 2010s, such as the Arab Spring and Maidan. These interventions completely changed the political economies of the affected nations, and in many cases, leading to social collapse and devastation. The USA would love nothing more than for the socialist government of Vietnam to collapse. And so from 2014 to 2019, the USA brought back protests and political sabotage campaigns all across Vietnam. Luckily, despite the hardship and chaos they bring about, all of these color revolution attempts have so far been defeated by the solidarity between the people of Vietnam and our socialist government. Vietnam has had to be resilient and creative in responding to decades of economic warfare and constant schemes and sabotage attempts from the West, especially from the USA. United States imperialism is not just about invasions and war through military force. Economic and political might are also major coercive instruments of the USA, and they can be every bit as destructive as tanks and aircraft carriers. Because we are constantly under attack, both politically and economically, Vietnam cannot afford to be dragged into conflict with any other country. In many ways, we are still recovering from the devastation of the war and comprehensive embargoes. So it is vital that we spend our limited resources in helping our people and developing our economy. This need for stability and peace has led to the development of a comprehensive package of diplomatic strategies and policies, which we have been refining since the 1990s. In order to protect our hard-won independence and maintain our friendship with as many nations as possible. Taken together, these diplomatic positions are known as Vietnam's 4 no's policy. Here are our 4 no's. Number 1, no military alliance with any countries. Number 2, no alignment with one country against another country. Number 3, no permission for any country to put military bases in our territory. And number 4, no use of force or threatening to use force in international relations. Now let's talk about number 1. Vietnam does not join any military alliance with any countries. Vietnam has had enough war. We know better than most nations how destructive and horrible war is, and we will do everything we can to avoid getting dragged into another one. Number 2, Vietnam does not align with any countries against other countries. The reason for this is very simple. Vietnam does not want to become a puppet of any country, and we also do not want to bully any country. Vietnam truly wants to be a friend to every nation on earth as much as possible. Number 3, and also the most relevant to today's topic, Vietnam does not allow any countries to put military bases in our territory. This means that Vietnam does not accept foreign military bases on our territory, and we don't allow any country to use part of our territory to wage war against other countries. Modern history, especially the US aggression against Iran, clearly shows that if there are foreign military bases on our territory, it is easy to turn our country into the target of hostile forces, or will at least make it difficult for our country to avoid being drawn into conflicts and wars between countries. Not only that, military bases can become headquarters for intelligence operations, which are used to destabilize and infiltrate nations. The fact is, the US has been begging us to allow them to put military bases in Vietnam for years, especially naval bases on our coastline, but our answers were always no. Number 4, Vietnam does not use force or threaten to use force in international relations. Vietnam does not speak with violence. We only use negotiation and communication to solve conflicts of interest. But to be clear, this principle does not contradict the purpose of modernizing the military or the primary mission of the Vietnamese armed forces, which is to defend the country, including by using force when necessary. If you look at the international situation of Asia, it's easy to see that a lot of conflict between our nations has been stoked by the West over the course of the last century. Of course, war and conflict are not new to Asia, and some of our nations have had tensions and conflict since long before the USA was ever even been founded. But it is undeniable that the USA has leveraged such existing conflicts and manufactured new ones to keep Asian nations at each other's throats instead of working together to build a stronger and more peaceful region. Vietnam is one of the few nations in Asia that has managed, for the most part, to avoid conflict with our neighbors until back to the 1990s. Certainly, things are not perfect. But I believe that for the most part, our foreign policies has been a resounding success. And I believe that it's a formula that can be easily adopted in any nation without too much modification. Wherever you are in Asia, whichever nation and culture you come from, I hope you will take the time to study Vietnam's foreign policy and consider advocating that your own nation develop a similar program. Every nation in Asia should come together to push the United States military and intelligence apparatus out of our region. We must not allow ourselves to be further divided and weaponized against one another for the benefit of the empire. Hands up, Asia. Solidarity. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Luna. I think that was a really insightful presentation, also looking at this foreign policy as a key means of Vietnam's protection of its national sovereignty, learn from a history of liberation and war as well. And I think now we're going to turn from, the anniversary of that liberation into a war that is actually being waged right now in West Asia. And our next speaker is Setare Sadeki, who is an assistant professor at the University of Tehran's Faculty of World Studies. She's speaking to us from there, and she's going to bring an analysis, of course, from a country that is under siege right now. And she'll be talking about the illegal U.S.-Israeli war on Iran and the Iranian people, and also the reality of U.S. bases in the region that have not actually provided security for the peoples of West Asia. So please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Tangs, and thank you, everyone. I'm very honored and very happy to share this panel with the distinguished scholars from Asia and from across the world. And I'm going to talk to you, as Tangs has also mentioned, about the myth of US bases as shields. Right now, I'm talking to you from Isfahan, the third largest city in Iran, and also the second city most impacted by the current war. It's been just a couple of weeks ever since the ceasefire started that we have got a break from the fighter jets flying over us and hearing explosions, during days and nights, and of course, anxiously wondering if our loved ones are okay. So the title of my presentation is The U.S.-Israeli Imperialist Aggression on Iran and the Myth of U.S. Bases as Shield. As all of you probably know, Iran came under attack from all these military or occupation bases or U.S. military facilities and assets in the region hosted by the family monarchies around the Persian Gulf, namely UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia have provided their airspace and their lands to U.S. assets and military facilities in the region. They are spending billions of dollars in buying so-called defense systems from the United States, wishfully thinking that it would protect them against any potential attacks. The way this has worked so far has been because the US has always tried to divide and conquer by portraying Iran not only to the world and to its people, but also to the Persian Gulf countries as a threat to their security. And by that, it has managed to convince these monarchies to buy weapons, buy defense systems, and make so-called security pacts with the United States. there are many examples when these myths have been shattered, but I think the current war, which is going to be a turning point in the history of not only the region, but also the entire world and the history of the US as a hegemon and as an imperialist power, is showing a different page of history where this myth is shattered and challenged in a lot of easier way. So hosting US military facilities or occupation bases have been sold as protection, but in practice, it can transform Persian Gulf states or regimes from protected partners into exposed forward position or high value targets in any confrontation with Iran. I mean, currently it's about Iran, but it could be any other country that the US desires to launch an attack on and then wants to, if they are submarine enough, wants to respond to those attacks. Next slide. So this protection has actually turned into exposure. The central claim that these bases can bring about protection is blunt, because US bases do not simply deter conflict, they also import conflict. A conflict that is outside of these countries becomes part of those countries. So by embedding Persian Gulf states into Washington's military architecture, these facilities kind of narrow down the diplomatic maneuver, and they're actually inviting retaliation and making infrastructure vulnerable to spillover of the war. The promised shield in form of security guarantees and rapid response and deterrence actually becomes bullseyes, because these fixed military facilities or other US assets and interests, also Israeli assets and interests, become visible targets, especially when the the military structure of Iran uses missiles and drones warfare rather than, fighter jets, etc. And Iran has produced and can continue producing thousands of drones, and which are very affordable to make, but also very easy, to use and bypass security and defense systems. So they actually become the target of those missiles and drone warfares. The host states also lose their autonomy. They lose their sovereignty, because naturally, by hosting US military bases, they become tied to US escalation choices. They do not have a choice which country to engage with. It is the US that decides it, and they have to go along with it. Next slide. So the Persian Gulf states host, as we all know, a dense network of US occupation facilities. We have Al Ubaid in Qatar, NSA in Bahrain, also the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. There are installations in Kuwait, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and related logistic nodes. These bases and assets are framed as deterrents against Iran, yet their geography places these host societies beyond or beside command centers, and they become runaways, ports, radar systems, and fuel depots. But precisely these assets become the target of Iran's response to the initial attacks, because, as we said, these airspaces and assets have been used in order to launch attacks on Iran. Next slide. So what we're actually seeing is that these regimes move from deterrence to being target of retaliation. U.S. occupation facilities have endured more than 170 attacks, and the damages sustained by the United States are far more than initially acknowledged, like the new data that is coming out, which still we have to wait until actual and total data on the damages that the U.S. has sustained will come out. And we know how there is censorship, and they do not allow people are being arrested. Even Western citizens have been arrested in UAE, in Kuwait, and other places because of filming the aftermath of Iran's responses. So we don't know the exact numbers, but at least more than 170 attacks have been launched on these bases, and the pattern definitely is not accidental, because foreign bases operate as tripwires, and they convert these so-called allies who have been complicit in the killings of Iranian civilians into legitimate targets. And no matter how much they deny that they have done so, the evidence is very clear. And I mean, Iran knows which bases and which airspaces have been used in order to, for example, attack certain bases, and it's very clear that by becoming a so-called ally of the United States, which I believe the United States as an imperialist power does not really have allies. It's mostly slaves and minions that are serving the interests of the U.S. imperialist power. Next slide. There are, as I said, many different attacks. The examples include the attacks on, or Iran's response on Al Ubaid in Qatar, the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, Prince Sultan Saudi Arabia's base, and many of these radars that the United States had bragged about being sort of invincible, and creating this image of being invincible and impossible to attack, have become sources of vulnerability for these family monarchies in the region. There are many studies, there are studies about this. I mean, this is a new development, so we have to wait until we can find more sources on what exactly has been happening. But the core finding of all these studies is that U.S. facilities create an illusion of reassurance for the elites, for those in power, and they also create like retaliatory targets. They eliminate neutrality, because by becoming a partner in crime of the U.S. crimes, naturally they cannot claim that they are neutral, and they have not taken a side, because by hosting those military bases, they actually have taken a side already against Iran. And so this exposes these hosting regimes to military blowback. There are studies also, for example, by Chatham House analysis that identifies a flawed bargain. So these Persian Gulf regimes are trading their sovereignty and flexibility for a security umbrella that asymmetric threats can easily bypass. So when Iranian drones and missiles started attacking U.S. targets, the U.S. could barely defend itself against attacks. So it definitely will not go out of its way to protect the hosting countries. And that's one of the complaints that these regimes have had, that the US sort of has abandoned us and is not doing anything to protect us against Iran's attacks. And because of these security pacts, they do not have the sovereignty or the military capability to defend themselves. So the structure of the base bargain has been that there is this strategic inversion. What appears as insurance can function as a liability when the country targeted by the U.S. strikes the infrastructure that enables these U.S. operations. So the direct attacks cause massive costs and losses on these hosting regimes. And the question of whether or not having pacts with the US will save us, I mean, becomes a debate within the society. Next slide.
Maybe Satare, if you can start wrapping up your comments, that would be great. Thanks.
Sure, I have. Yeah, okay. So the slogan, a pact with the US will save you, is now already sort of shattered, and these bases have become actually massive bullseyes, and they have actually formulated a problem for the region where the host governments cannot de-escalate independently, and they are actually hosting and facilitating escalation against other sovereign nations in the region. Next slide, please. I think the foundation for all of what is happening, I mean, what we have been discussing in order to also wrap up, we have published an article with Christopher Weaver just right after the 12-day war, where we observed how there is this Orientalist depiction of Iran in order to, show Iran as an irrational actor, and because of this irrationality, it's always posing a threat to the United States, to the Zionist entity, to the states in the Persian Gulf, when in fact these are all serving these Orientalist trope are in the service of the imperialist depiction and narrative of Iran in order to convince the countries in the same region to buy this pact and become complicit and partner to U.S. crimes in the region. On the other side of the Orientalist depiction of Iran is a hyper-real enemy, an enemy who cannot be defeated, who is invincible, and if you have a pact with it, it's definitely will save you. When in fact, that's exactly the other end of the same spectrum of a narrative war in order to convince the hosting regimes to become partner in U.S. crimes. So as a conclusion, we can say that security requires distance from the imperialist power, not dependency on the imperialist power. You can click on this next slide, which is the last slide. So US bases are actually importing war to the region, and the myth of deterrence is obscuring the vulnerability that these bases are bringing, and neutrality is cannot happen when you are hosting the imperialist powers bases and assets, allowing them to use it against another nation. And the question always is who benefits from the base architecture and who absorbs the consequences. When we can answer that question, then it's clear who actually benefits from any pact with the United States. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cesare. This is an impressive, I think, presentation. You're living under a siege, but I think at the same time, we have seen the resistance of Iran as really the front line of resistance against U.S. imperialism, and really unmasking this whole idea of this 800 military bases, the U.S. military bases around the world being anything that helps the peoples that host them. So thank you very much for that presentation. And I'm going to go next to our next speaker, who is Keiko Yonaha, who is a co-representative of No More Battle of Okinawa and Okinawa's Voice. And of course, I had a chance to meet her and got to see her and other comrades in the grassroots movements that have been for decades literally resisting U.S. bases, standing in front of the bases on a daily basis to organize against that military occupation. Okinawa is just 0.6% of Japan's territory, but hosts 70% of all the U.S. bases and military facilities of Japan. So please take it away, Keiko-san.
Okay.
Can you see?
It's perfect.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Sorry. Okay, thank you very much for your introduction. And let me start. My presentation title is Okinawa's Post-War History, U.S. Military Occupation and Remilitarization of Japan. And I'll present the post-war history of Okinawa briefly. And Okinawa is located between mainland Japan and Taiwan. It consists of the islands of Okinawa, Miyako, and Yaeyama. As you can see, comparing to Taiwan, Okinawa mainland of Okinawa Island is so small where I'm living. And Okinawa was the only place in Japan where a ground war was fought in the Pacific theater of the World War II. The Battle of Okinawa began with a fierce naval bombardment by battleships surrounding the island, dubbed the Iron Typhoon. The battle resulted in 1 out of 3 or 4 Okinawans being killed in the war. And with the peace treaty in 1951, the 2 secret pacts were concluded. One is the base right, which allows the U.S. to maintain military bases anywhere in Japan. The other, the command authority, under which, in the event of a crisis, the Japanese SDF will be under the control of the U.S. military. And as you know, in Article 3 of the Peace Treaty, Okinawa was put under the U.S. military occupation. And forced land seizure for U.S. military bases started already in 1950, before the peace treaty was concluded. People resisted it in many places in Okinawa. However, they were forced to be driven from their homes by bayonets and bulldozers. Some of them were forced to relocate to Bolivia. And Okinawa, under U.S. military occupation, U.S. military bases were given priority under extraterritoriality, and fundamental human rights was disregarded. As you can see here, most U.S. military offenders were acquitted. Even convicted criminals can flee to the U.S. So Okinawa is in the situation without fundamental human right. And the reason Okinawan teachers took the lead in the movement for reversion to Japan was that they were driven by a strong desire to rebuild education above all for the sake of the children. So there were 3 expectations for the return to Japan: education recovery, the benefit of the peace constitution, and peace without U.S. military bases. However, Okinawa's voices were not heard. And as you see here, the hope that Okinawa would become a peaceful island free of military bases has not been realized. Currently, as you know, Ting said, 70% of U.S. military facilities in Japan are concentrated in Okinawa, which accounts for only 0.6% of Japan's total land area. As of 1953, U.S. troops were stationed in mainland Japan at a ratio of 89% to 11% in Okinawa. However, as of 1959, the proportion of U.S. military facilities became at 62% in mainland Japan and 38% in Okinawa. It is because of the anti-military base movement in mainland Japan that the U.S. bases were removed to Okinawa under U.S. occupation, which has no voice, no power to resist it. And here, if this is calculated as density, it means that the U.S. military bases are concentrated in Okinawa at a density 386 times that of the rest of Japan. 386 times. And the constant roar of U.S. military aircraft is now spreading across the entire island. PFAS contamination in drinking water in Okinawa continues to threaten our mental and physical health. However, efforts to access the base for investigation are not permitted under the Japan-US Status of Force Agreement. And these places, we have U.S. military bases, and these areas, they are suffering from the noise pollution and also PFAS contamination. And in that Okinawa Women Act Against Military Violence updated their report on sexual assaults, the most serious military crimes, from 1945 to 2024. And just, a week ago, we paid tribute to a 20-year-old woman who was, raped and killed on April 24th in 2016. And it's surprising if you read this. In 1945, a 5-year-old girl was raped, killed, and dumped. And here, 1949, a 9-month-old baby was raped and killed. And 1996, a 5th grader was raped by 3 U.S. soldiers. And it kind of, made the starting point to, return the in Gino-1's, Tenma Air Base. However, now, at present, it is clear that it was not. It will not be, returned, even though the new military base is constructing up in the northern part of Okinawa at the same time. And here, and in that kind of circumstance, the most shocking news came in on December 24th, 2021. That Okinawa will be the front line of the war triggered by a Taiwan contingency, because it's from U.S. and Japan government to Okinawa. And in EABO, Expeditionary Advanced Base Operation, in the bilateral operation planning of the SDF and the U.S. military, it is the Okinawan residents who receive the counterattack. We had already, learned that the military did not protect the residents during the Battle of Okinawa. So, that kind of, history will be repeated if, we have such a kind of, approaching war. And in the 2+2 documents, it was decided to increase the joint use of the bases by the U.S. military and SDF. It was under the administration of Kishi. And why is the U.S. able to predict Taiwan contingency? As you already know, the term Taiwan contingency first appeared when former commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Philip Davidson, said, "A Taiwan contingency involving China will occur within 6 years without any specific evidence or facts." Mr. Okada Takashi, a journalist, pointed out that U.S. policy towards Taiwan is strikingly similar to its policy towards Ukraine before the war broke out. Here you can see. And Mr. Konishi Makoto, our military expert, noted that you will read Taiwan contingency links to the U.S. military build-up against China aimed at hegemonic rivalry in U.S. National Defense Strategy issued in 2022. And as I said, this is about bilateral defense planning, as I already mentioned, EBO. And even though the Japanese government, hypes up the China threat, it is the U.S., Japan, and some European countries that repeat their joint exercise every year near China and North Korea, and the size is expanding, as you can see here, from 2021 to 2025. It is getting nationwidely exercised, including mainland Japan. And even, Japan and the SDF and US talked about using nuclear war weapons in the diagram exercise. So you can see that reality is the militaries of Japan, the US, and Europe continue to pose a threat to China. So there are questions and opinions. Is Taiwan contingency a Japanese contingency? Okay. The first and most important question raised regarding the issue of a Taiwan contingency is a legal one. Prime Minister Abe's statement reflects the view that Taiwan contingency is a Japanese contingency. However, given that both Japan and the United States recognize the One China principle internationally and acknowledge that Taiwan is Chinese territory, a Taiwan contingency cannot constitute a Japanese contingency, I think. The next question is, the Japanese government, having approved the possession of capabilities to attack enemy bases, has shifted its stance from defense to one permitting preemptive strike. So it is a violation of the peace construction. So there are, opinions against each other. Who is trying to make it? China. Base is China's threat theory, and U.S. based on U.S. proxy war. And we have to kind of, deal with the deterrence theory, still kind of rooted in Okinawan people. And also there are people who believe that the U.S. military will help in the crisis of Japan. I doubt it, because we have already seen in Ukrainian war, and because Japan is not a member of NATO, it is impossible. And so the current situation of Japan is the outcome of having violated the public's right to know by secret pacts with benefit of the party. Therefore, I assume that without a change of the right-wing type of LDP administration, war is inevitable.
Okay, cool. Would you mind maybe wrapping up your final comments? Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll finish in a minute. And we Okinawans have been resisting everything connected with war and making efforts to seek peace without military bases. So this picture shows the resistance in Okinawa under U.S. military occupation. And this one, resistance against the Japanese government after 1972. No military base, never give up. And resistance against the new war approaching Okinawa and Japan started here in 2022. And resistance against making Okinawa a battlefield again. From 2021 to 2023, we had a dialogue project to understand each other across party lines to reach to our common goal of no war. And this is the contents of the second Okinawan-Taiwan Dialogue Symposium. So, we believe in the power of the people seeking peace. We should remember that two large anti-war rallies defeated madman plan to expand the war and use nuclear weapons in the Vietnam War. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Kiko-san. I think this is a very important reminder of a long history of resistance against U.S. military bases, because in Okinawa, a base is not a singular place. It's actually the occupation of everyday life, and you're basically encircled by bases. So I think it's really important to highlight this, and I think you made a great segue to our next speaker, who is speaking to us from Taiwan. Professor Chen Meixian is from the Changong University, the National University of Taiwan, who's a professor from the Department of Public Health, and also an activist rooted in the Baodao movement, which has been challenging U.S. militarism and hegemony in East Asia for some time. And so she'll speak on U.S. military and ideological control and the resistance movement in Taiwan, China. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can people see my slides?
It's great.
Is it clear? Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction, Tins. And also, it is very interesting that Keiko, you talk about Taiwan. In fact, you mentioned the dialogue, in Okinawa, and the participant. One of them is our board of directors. So we know him very well. Li Zhenbang, he participated. And I think that the reason we have all of this dialogue is because we have similar experiences. So I'm going to talk about Taiwan, but as an example. So the topic of my talk is U.S. military and ideological. I think this is very important. I want to raise people's attention to that ideological control in Taiwan, China, and its impact on cross-strait relations. You can see it from the map here that this is, let's say, this is Taiwan, and this is mainland China. And then this is Taiwan Strait. Okay? And because of the U.S. Military intervention or ideological control, Taiwan Strait has been in great trouble, in last many decades. And I'm going to talk about the reasons behind that. Once we know this reasons or know the background, then I think we will have a very different point of view about the U.S. Military and ideological control. I won't spend much time in this first, let's see, first slide. Everybody knows that U.S. military intervention or the bases is everywhere in the world. And we know that the numbers, 750 to 800 U.S. military bases in 80 countries or areas. Taiwan is just one of them. I'm going to talk about Taiwan as part of China. To start with the whole story of the U.S. intervention, I want to first talk about Taiwan. Most of the people do not know enough about Taiwan. Taiwan is part of China, okay? And it's, in fact, although we see here there's Taiwan Strait, but about 30,000 years ago, these two places, Taiwan and mainland China, are connected with a land bridge. Okay? And the people in Taiwan, the indigenous people, mostly are from mainland China. Okay? Particularly because there's a land bridge, Chinese people can walk across and go to Taiwan. And also Chinese state activities in Taiwan has been occurring, since 1800 years ago. And the migration of the Han Chinese people from the mainland, started from 900 years ago. And since then, during these dynasties, Song, Yuan, Minh, Qin, there have been continuous migration of the Chinese people to Taiwan. And so Taiwan now is 96% of the population in Taiwan is Han Chinese people. My ancestry is from Guangdong, one of the provinces, and 300 years ago. And Taiwan, from 1684 to 1885, is part of Fujian province. This is Fujian province. And now Taiwan is a province of China itself, is a province since 1985. But this connection, these two places, the connection for thousands of years was interrupted or disconnected 3 times due to imperialist invasion or occupation of Taiwan. 1624 to 1662, Dutch colonization, 38 years. 1895 to 1945, Japanese colonization, 50 years. And then from 1950 to present, is the U.S. military and ideological control, which I consider is a type of colonization. And this is like many decades, almost no ending. So I will talk a little bit about 1950 to 1970, where we have in Taiwan, we have military and ideological control from the U.S. 1945, the World War II and Japanese colonization ended. So Taiwan was reconnected with the mainland China, but only briefly. In 1945 to 50, U.S. imperialism intervened in the CCP and KMT civil war. And U.S. supported KMT militarily, financial, or other resources. And in 1949, KMT was defeated by CCP. And then KMT retreated to Taiwan. Since then, Taiwan Strait has been in troubled waters. So in 1950, Korean War happened. There was a Korean War. And from that war, the U.S. realized that China is strong enough to influence other areas. So the U.S., to prevent the expansion of PRC's influence, U.S. included Taiwan in the containment strategy. So Taiwan is incorporated into the U.S.-led Far East anti-communist, anti-Chinese Cold War front line. Everybody knows the 4 tigers. That's for the containment strategy. So during this period of time, is the Cold War period, the U.S. established a military base in Taiwan. 1950, U.S. sent 7th Fleet to Taiwan Strait. 1954, the 2 places, the ROC and U.S. developed or established the Mutual Defense Treaty. So all of this is very clear U.S. intervention in China's internal affairs. And the U.S. used economic assistance or ideological control to control Taiwan. And Taiwan, with the U.S. support, Taiwan also was under martial law for 40 years and under White Terror. There's a lot of sad stories about this period of time, but I didn't have much time. I only showed this picture. This shows that during the 1950s and 60s, many people who wanted patriots, who wanted to do things for Taiwan and for China, they were killed by KMT with the support of the U.S. government. So this is the mass graveyard of the people who were killed, and is unmarked. People do not know who they are, and they're just under the ground. So this is just one picture to show you since I have limited time. Okay. So what do I mean by ideological control? Okay. In Taiwan, U.S. has systematic ideological propaganda machine with the Taiwan's educational system, media, other propaganda machine, and also U.S. will support the young people to study abroad, mostly to the U.S. Like I'm one example. I went to Hawaii East-West Center because of the U.S. Fellowship. Okay. And it's a very systematic training of pro-American elites, fellowship, foundations, or Asian Foundation. Okay, and the main theme of the ideological control is anti-communist, liberalism, modernization theory, in universal values like individual freedom, human rights, Western democracy, anti-Chinese, pro-American. So the consequences of ideological control is Taiwan's mainstream ideology is pro-American, admire America, anti-communist, anti-China. Okay, so that's the consequence of the ideological control. So I have, since I have limited time, I just a few pictures to show you. This is the U.S. military base from 1950 to 1979, and you see, these are number of the troops in Taiwan, the U.S. military base. And this is Chiang Kai-shek, who is a dictator and who is the leader of KMT, who control Taiwan after KMT was retreated to Taiwan. And this is the commander of the 7th Fleet and the advisory group, and so and so. Okay. And this is, again, you can see that this is the leader, Chiang Kai-shek, the dictator, and the military troops, have the picture. He went to see all these U.S. troops. Yeah. So this is from 1950 to 1979. But in 1979, big events happened which have a lot of impact on Taiwan's situation. That is, there's a diplomatic relation between PRC and USA. And the condition for the PRC for the establishment of the diplomatic relation is first, sever diplomatic relations with ROC, Republic of China, led by Chiang Kai-shek or Taiwan. And this is 1979. Okay. And also another condition is to withdraw troops. And this withdrawal of troops is completed by 1979. And then terminate the treaty. I mentioned the treaty between ROC and the US, and it was terminated in 1980. But I wanted to emphasize the withdrawal of the troops does not mean less evil than ideological control. The ideological control is the most evil because it affects every single person in Taiwan. Okay. So after 1979, even though the PRC and the U.S. established the diplomatic relation, but the U.S. control of Taiwan, the U.S. would not give up. Okay, so In 1979, U.S. Developed a Taiwan Relations Act. Right in 1971, right after the establishment of the diplomatic relations. Okay, and starting from that, even though there's no military bases, but there's continuous arms sale. It continued. If you can look at this is public data, you can look at Google. Every single U.S. president would sell arms to Taiwan. Okay, and the most recent one in Taiwan, I mean, we're still in this controversy. $400 billion US. The U.S. government forced Taiwan to buy this arms sale. Okay, so and another thing is the U.S. still send troops or people to the U.S. troops to train Taiwan's troops. Okay, and the ideological control still continue. Okay, and this is my last. Since I have limited the time, so I wanted to talk about the resistance movement in Taiwan. I myself have been involved in the resistance movement for the past half century. Okay, but I didn't have much time. And next time I can talk more about our resistance movement. And this picture I wanted to show is it is a society we call the China War of Resistance Against Japan, Historical Truth Preservation Society. Japan, I mean, I'm talking about the government. Japan had been not recognizing or admitting that Japan caused a lot of slaughter in China, including Taiwan. Okay, 3,500 million people, Chinese people, were killed, died because of this Second World War, the U.S. Invasion. And still, the people in Japan, or particularly the government, would not admit whatever they have done to the Chinese people. So that's why we have this association. I just say the China War of Resistance Against Japan, Historical Truth Preservation Society. And it was last month, we have a group of people, about 20 people from this society went to Japan to protest to the Japanese government, telling them that you should really admit and you should take the lessons and not to do it anymore. But from Keiko's presentation, we know that Japan actually is the other way around. It continued doing it. So this is the people who went to Japan to protest. And I want to mention to everybody that the president of the society is Zhong Huimin, is this person. He is in the audience. Okay. And also Secretary General Professor Guan is the Secretary General. They were interested in our talk, so they say that they want to participate as audience, and also they have been doing a lot of work as like resistance movement to the U.S. and also Japan. Everybody knows Japan is very much supported by the U.S. They collude, with each other. So this is all my talk, and thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Chen, and also welcome to all the guests who are with us, over 100 people in the webinar today. I'm going to pass on the floor to our next speaker, Corazon Valdez Fabros, who is the co-president of the International Peace Bureau and a core member of the Asia-Europe People's Forum. thematic circle on peace and security, as well as a member of the steering committee of the Dismantle Military Industrial Complex Network. Also another veteran in the long struggle, decades in the forefront of the struggles against U.S. military expansion in the Philippines and, of course, around the world. So please go ahead, Corazon.
Thank you so much. Thanks. And I appreciate that I am speaking after the four presenters coming from countries where, the Philippines have different relations over many decades. In particular, I would say that for Vietnam, Luna, thank you so much for giving us a sense about where and Vietnam has been. I would like to say that much of my political orientation have, been during the Vietnam War. And I think I owe it to that country to have learned deeply how the U.S. bases in the Philippines then have become instruments and big contributors to the war in Vietnam during the 70s. And of course, Okinawa, also always an inspiration. I think about it for many decades. So at this point, I think I'd like to greet all of you, fellow comrades and friends from different parts of our region and beyond. We gather today under a banner that is both a demand and a necessity. And I appreciate we have a title which says Hands Off Asia. And I think this is not only a long time call, but it's especially now a very timely call that we need to pursue. As we speak, from April 20 to May 8 this year, our archipelago, the Philippines, is vibrating with the machinery of destruction. We are currently witnessing Balikatan 2026. Balikatan means shoulder to shoulder. That's the meaning. That's a term in Filipino. This is the largest war games in our history. It has never happened. We have at the moment 17,000 troops, foreign troops coming from the US, from Japan, Okinawa, Australia, Wales, 7 nations. Some of them are part of the NATO forces. And so it's been, disheartening to see, the return of, the US troops to the Philippines, despite our long-term struggle and the constitutional provision against foreign military bases in our country. So, as I said, in different parts of the Philippines, we are an archipelago, and the northernmost part is bounded by the Taiwan Strait. So our friend from Taiwan is actually a neighbor for the Philippines. And a massive fuel depot looms over the southern Philippines. On the other end of the archipelago is also a place where an ammunition, an oil depot is being built, and an ammunition hub has been carved into Subic, the former US naval base in the Philippines today. So the proponents of these games call this defense. But for ordinary Filipinos like me, it feels like something much more sinister. Our towns and communities are being turned into a forward tripwire state. I heard one of our speakers mention about tripwire, situation, I think you would know what it means. And we are being positioned as the first line of fire in a conflict we did not choose, acting as a shield for a superpower's interest, while our own people are left exposed to the fallout. To understand the threat to regional peace, we must look at the numbers, actually. And according to the CIPRI, which was recently released, military spending report of 2025 has reached an unprecedented amount of 2.8 trillion US dollars, almost 3 trillion now. To understand the threat to regional peace, we must look at the numbers. So that's one point that's very important to note. So let me sink in, let that thought sink in to each one of us. And to say that nearly $3 trillion funneled into weapons of death. I call it weapons of death, actually, because it is what it is, weapons of death, while the world grapples with pervasive hunger and escalating climate crisis. The United States alone, as you can see, contributed a colossal $954 billion US dollars, 1/3 of the entire planet's war budget. So even if we put together the amount of military spending of the other top spenders, it would not even equal that of the budget for military of the United States. Where am I? Okay. Okay. The International Peace Bureau and the global campaign on military spending remind us of the fundamental truth. Every peso or dollar squandered on war is a direct theft from the people's fundamental right to survival. This is the war economy. The US has a war economy. It is an economy that prioritizes the interoperability of missiles over the interoperability of our healthcare system. It is a system that finds billions for joint operations, but tells us there is no money for classrooms, no money for teachers, and no money for hospital beds, unfortunately. So the war economy, I'm lost. I'm always lost, sorry. Okay. It's not a distant concept. Its impact resonates profoundly at our kitchen tables. So as of March 2026, inflation in the Philippines stands at 4.1%. Our people are struggling to survive as fuel costs really gone up, and rice, our basic staple, hovers at a staggering 60 to 70 pesos per kilo. Why are we paying these prices, by the way? Because militarism and peace are inextricably linked to our livelihoods. Unfortunately, the Philippine government have seen its priorities in modernizing the Philippine military. In the West Asia conflict, ignited by US-Israel strikes on Iran, it has led to the closure of Strait of Hormuz, and the consequence for us in the Philippines, both in terms of our economy, as well as the survival of the almost 2 million overseas Filipino workers that are currently finding jobs in the West, in West Asia, in different parts of the Middle East. Perhaps the most insidious expansion of U.S. militarism is not found on a naval base, but in the high-tech zones of central region of the Philippines. We are being sold a vision called Pax Silica. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's all over in the news. It is peace through silicon and high-tech supremacy. But let us be clear. I think we need to understand this. This is not innovation. We are trying to unravel this as much as we can before the Filipino public, because it is occupation dressed up as progress. And it covers about 4,000 acres of land, which is going to be occupied by the United States high-tech manufacturing zone, and that has been carved out of our land. And many of these lands belong to the indigenous peoples of that region. It is a colonial enclave, I would say, granted diplomatic immunity, just like what was granted to them when the Visiting Forces Agreement was signed. And it is governed by U.S. common law for up to 99 years and renewable thereafter. Within these walls, companies like Intel, Micron, Lockheed Martin, and Applied Materials operate. These are not just tech companies. No? Lockheed Martin is the world's largest defense contractor today, the architect of the fighter jets and missile defense systems currently being tested in our seas during the Balikatan exercise. This zone is designed to exploit our critical minerals and semiconductors to feed the U.S. war supply chain. It reduces, of course, our workers and our communities to hostage of militarized technology and also taking advantage of cheap labor of Philippine workers. True peace is not found in silicon chips, no, or foreign-controlled zones. It is found in dignity of human dignity, in sovereignty, and in the ability of a nation to use its own resources for the care of its people. It's been our call, and I think many of you also feel the same way. This expansion is a direct threat to the stability of Asia and beyond, I guess. In the West Philippine Sea, which China calls South China Sea, we see U.S. and Chinese warships engaged in a dangerous standoff. By allowing the U.S. to build fuel depots, ammunition hubs, and Pax Silica enclaves, the Philippines is being pulled deeper into a perilous great power rivalry, which we don't want to happen. We are told we need this presence for security, but true security is not missiles. It is food on the table. It is roof over our head and communities that thrive in peace. It's in many areas, especially in southern part of the Philippines, have long been suffering because not only of poverty, but internal and external conflict. By becoming a tripwire, the Philippines is not preventing war. We are making the Philippines the inevitable battlefield for one. So the Stop the War Coalition, Philippines, and of course the International Peace Bureau stand united in our demands. And this is our call to cut military budgets now and redirect the trillions to healthcare, education, and climate resilience. Second, stop the war on our livelihood. Suspend fuel and excise taxes. So these are the calls during our campaigns here in the Philippines. Of course, the very recent development that refers to Pax Silica, we want that rejected. We also call for the abrogation of unequal military agreements and dismantle the foreign military bases and hubs in the Philippines, which are getting more and more, and getting bigger and bigger every year. It is a world where the brilliance it should be, comrades, I would say, the Hands of Asia campaign, and that's my understanding, is more than a protest. It is a vision of a different world. It is a world where the brilliance of our scientists is used for renewable energy, not missile guidance, where the labor of our workers builds schools, not ammunition hubs. We're not definitely a tripwire, and we would like to emphasize that and continue to struggle and fight that the Philippines should be able to maintain the requirements of its constitution against the presence of foreign military bases. So let us invest in justice, not war. Let us invest in sustainability, not silicon supremacy, which is happening these days. And let us reclaim our land, our seas, and our future. Build international solidarity amongst peoples and movements. With you, comrades and friends, we would like to say, hands off the Philippines, hands off Asia, and invest in people, not war. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Corazon, dear comrade. I mean, I think that was the message we were hoping, that the anti-war message, anti-militarism message is also around pro-people message. So thank you very much for that intervention. And we're going to our last but not least speaker based in Seoul in South Korea, which is Jung-eun Hwang, who is the General Secretary of the International Strategy Center, which also forms part of the IPA. And the ISC has been building international solidarity and trying to build a critical analysis on this new Cold War and how it impacts the Korean Peninsula. And so please take it away, Jung-eun.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Tings, for the introduction. And everyone can see the slides, right? Okay, I'm Jung-eun Hwang, and I'm General Secretary of the ISC, called International Strategy Center. And it's an organization that opposes capitalism and imperialism based on social movement in Korea. We identify, promote, and support both domestic and international struggle, as well as alternative models. Today, I will present on U.S. military bases and the new Cold War architecture on the Korean Peninsula. Since I'm the last speaker and it's already, we haven't used enough time, and I'll take out some parts that other speakers already spoke. So I'm going to start with a quick overview of the U.S. forces in South Korea. The U.S. military has been stationed in South Korea since 1945, following the end of the World War II and Korea's liberation from Japanese rule, initially as an occupying force. After the Korean War armistice in 1953, this presence was formalized through the Korea-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty. And later in 1966, the Status of Force Agreement, so-called SOFA, was signed, and this agreement defines the legal status of U.S. forces in Korea and regulates the use of military facility and land. And today, approximately 28,500 U.S. troops are stationed in South Korea. The land located for U.S. military use total about 95 million square meters. To give you a sense of scale, that is roughly the size equivalent to more than 13,000 soccer fields. And there are currently 62 U.S. military bases across South Korea. And as all U.S. military bases, we have a lot of controversy over U.S. Military presence in South Korea because there have been various incidents, including crimes such as murder cases, sexual assault, and also the environmental damage that had been throughout the presence of the currently ongoing as well. And recently, the United States has increasingly emphasized the U.S. First Korea should play a central role in its Indo-Pacific strategy. In this context, it has even openly raised the possibility that the U.S. troops stationed in South Korea could be involved in a conflict between China and Taiwan. And at the same time, Washington argues that this shift is necessarily to respond to China's rapid military buildup, its expanding regional influence, and the growing military cooperation among China, Russia, and North Korea. So it becomes a front line of the new Cold War on the Korean Peninsula. So this approach is referred to as a modernization of Korea-US alliance. From Washington's perspective, modernization is not simply about maintaining the current alliance structure. Rather, it involves expanding the role of U.S. forces Korea beyond defending South Korea to include countering China. So under this approach, South Korea would be expected to increase its defense spending and assume primarily responsibility for its own defense. At the same time, it would cooperate more closely with the U.S., Japan, and other Indo-Pacific partners. This reflects a broader shift in the U.S. defense strategy. The U.S. is increasingly prioritizing homeland defense and the containment of China, especially in relation to Taiwan. So as part of this strategy, Washington is urging allies like South Korea to significantly increase military spending and take on a greater share of responsibility. And in fact, at a Korea-US summit last year, Lee Jae-myung administration agreed to gradually increase defense spending to 3.5% of GDP. However, this modernization also involves significant risks. If U.S. demands are implemented, particularly granting greater strategic flexibility to U.S. forces Korea and aligning South Korea forces with effort to counter China, South Korea could effectively become a forward operating base against China. This would increase the risk of being drawn into the conflict. And at the regional level, bloc-based tension are also likely to intensify. The divide between the US, Japan, and South Korea on the one side, and China, North Korea, and Russia on the other side, that's kind of an ideology that the US tried to push on Korean Peninsula, could become more entrenched. And this would heighten geopolitical confrontation and reduce the chances for regional stability. Specifically for the Korean Peninsula, this trend could have serious implications because the social movement in South Korea tried to build more inner Korean peace, reconciliation, and long-term process to reunification with North Korea, but it also harms that process as well. So finally, there is an issue of strategic dependence. As this dynamic deepens, South Korea could become more reliant or dependent on the U.S. and Japan, and raising concern about reduced autonomy in its foreign and security policy. And this kind of new Cold War ideology, and also how the U.S. intends to use its overseas bases, can be seen in the remarks of Donald Trump and General Javier Brunson, the commander of the U.S. forces, Korea. So first, regarding the Trump's remarks, as all you have been known, when there was a summit between South Korea and U.S. last year, August, Trump said, I'd like to do and ask them to give us ownership of the land where the military bases stations. So one of the professor in South Korea explains this because although the U.S. forces use bases in South Korea without paying rent, it's free for them to use, the land remains under the Korean sovereignty. And the reason that Trump said this, because it creates a certain limitation on how freely U.S. forces can operate on Korean soil. From the U.S. perspective, there may be attempts to find more flexible way to operate. One idea is to grant U.S. bases a legal status similar to embassy, with extraterritorial rights. While this is highly unrealistic because it needs approval from the National Assembly, and which is very unlikely, but it could still be used as a leverage, for example, by threatening troops withdrawal. So this suggests that strategic flexibility for the U.S. forces Korea is viewed by Washington as a non-negotiable red line in an alliance modernization. And the second, there's remarks from the General Brunson's. The first one he said at the symposium in Hawaii, happened in Hawaii, and he says, the Korea like a fixed aircraft carrier. And in the other incident, recently he had an interview with the Japan Times, and he mentioned about the kill web, and it's a link the military capability of South Korea, Japan, and possibly the Philippines. And this concept of a kill web aims to integrate the military capability of allied country into a single network system. And it expands the warfare beyond land, sea, and air into a space, cyber, and electromagnetic domains. So Brunson argued that such a trilateral kill web is necessary to respond to threats from North Korea, China, and Russia. And however, it also reflects the development of an integrated military network aimed at countering China. So this is also the East up map that the Brunson showed at some press conference. It's called the strategic triangle, and it shows how the Korea, Japan, and Philippines can be used in military alliance to check China and other North Korea and also Russia. So to conclude, U.S. forces in South Korea began as an occupying force in 1945, as I mentioned earlier. While its legal status has evolved, some characteristic of that role arguably remains, still occupying forces. This can be seen in how the U.S. uses military bases globally to maintain its strategic dominance. In the past, U.S. emphasized its overseas bases for the protection, and however, under the current Trump administration, there is more explicit intention to use these bases in line with U.S. strategic goals. As the U.S. pursues its global interest, U.S. bases in South Korea may no longer function solely as a protection, but it could become a potential target as well. So I think it applies to other countries in Asia. So in response, there is a growing need for a network for peace and opposing to war. In South Korea since last year, an organizing committee for international people's action opposing and denouncing Trump has been formed to call for active peaceful action. So in the organizing committee, there are progressive political parties, labor unions, and civil society organizations. And we're working together to raise awareness and mobilize collective actions against the U.S. imperialism and military intervention. So our goal is to build solidarity for peace and sovereignty in response to military intervention by the U.S. That is why I'm so glad about the Hands of Asia campaign. And looking ahead, this peace-oriented network should be expanded across Asia. And I hope that today's webinar can serve as one step that directions, and that we can continue to build connection, dialogue, and cooperation together. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chonglin, for that, and ending us on exactly the note I think we wanted to think about how we can expand and build on this Hands Off Asia as a network across the region and across the world. So I know I want to respect everyone's time, and it's quite late in some regions in Asia. Asia's a big continent, and unfortunately we won't be able to go through the questions and comments, but we're going to collect them and keep track of them because we know that today is the start of a conversation we're going to be continuing through the next months. But I would like to give each speaker just a very short closing comment, maybe 1 to 2 minutes, and maybe reflect on one question. I mean, we've heard today from Vietnam to Iran, from Okinawa to Taiwan, Philippines, and South Korea. It's really a picture of a region under siege, under live war, whether it's the genocide in Palestine or the war in Iran, to the remilitarization in East and Southeast Asia. And I think people are beginning to see U.S. imperialism more clearly than ever. And so the question is, I mean, we could have chosen literally dozens of other examples in our region to have this webinar, and we will continue doing this to expand our analysis. So I'm asking in your closing comments, what do you think we need to be doing to build this solidarity, to build this awareness, this consciousness about U.S. militarism and imperialism? And any final comments in just a brief 1 or 2 minutes from each of you. And maybe I'll start with the order of your presentations. We can start with Luna. Please go ahead with your closing comments, please.
Okay, let me get to the point of the question. How do you, what do you do to understand the U.S. imperialism and what to do next? The most important thing is this, in order to understand why the U.S. doing all of this and why the countries, especially in Asia, is doing this, we need to understand the base, the economic base of it, because everything is related to, it's all about the capital, it's all about the money, the natural resources. It's the true answer for all of that. So the most important thing is you have to go study dialectical materialism and historical materialism, not just for the being nerds and reading books. No, it's to understand the core basic of Marxism, Leninism, to understand that why all of these countries, especially the USA, doing this to us, and to understand to the core bit, it is all about the economic base of a country. And from that point, you can truly see the true face of US imperialism. You can see through the lies of the US, like they can use like freedom and democracy, save your country, blah, blah, blah. But no, it's all about money. So the aggression against Iran just happened. It's not about saving a civilization whatsoever. It's about oil and the control of the US in the region and in Asia in general too. So it is very essential for us to see through all the curtains of lies coming from the USA, and what to do next is in this book. In this book, okay, I'm telling you, like, this is a Vietnamese curriculum of Marxism, Leninism. It's very important. I am on the position, the procedure of translating this whole curriculum of Marxism, Leninism, written by the best professor of Vietnam. And the ebook is completely free. Just go and grab it for free on bennyhouse.org/shop. Seriously, learning from this Vietnamese perspective, you will truly understand the true face of capitalism, the true face of US imperialism, and what to do next is how to learn about the historic mission of the working class. It is to put down capitalism, to end all the exploitation of capitalism. So it is very important and essential for us to go study, read, study, and talk to each other, and then turn all of that into into action, because Ho Chi Minh, the great Ho Chi Minh of Vietnam, already said that, you know, the theories always must come with the practice. But the most important thing is step number one, you learn about the true facts of capitalism and imperialism. And then from all of that, you build your plan, you build your action into having a socialist revolution in your country. Vietnam did it, Laos did it, Cuba did it, China did it. Now it's your turn. Now it is your turn to do the same thing. And until we all Asia get to the socialist revolution, we all have to keep fighting. So I think that is the core answer to this question.
Thank you very much, Luna. And to bring, of course, Uncle Ho into the picture as well. Setare, can you give your closing comments as well, please?
Sure. Well, to add to what Luna said about the necessity to learn about the objectives of U.S. imperialism and why they do what they're doing, or why they commit all the crimes against other nations. I also think it's very important to remember that this is the same playbook, and it's been used over and over, that it's so boring and predictable what they go after. Of course, for example, for Iran, they keep saying that, oh, Iranians are chanting death to America, or oh, it's because we want to liberate women, when in fact the animosity of the US as an imperialist power against the Iranian nation did not even start with the 1979 popular revolution. It started well before that. In 1953, CIA orchestrated a coup against the democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh, not because he was an Ayatollah, not because he was chanting death to America. He was secular, actually, but because he wanted to nationalize Iran's oil. And that's exactly the reason where you can trace U.S. hostilities against other nations. But I also want to add that there's not just one response to capitalism and imperialism. Iran, I think, is a very good example of incorporating indigenous cultural values and ideology into a very strong response to imperialism. I think for people to understand where this resistance that we're seeing coming from Iran comes from, they should maybe learn or read about the Shia theology, which has the tenets of social justice, or justice in general, and dignity as its basis and cores. Iran has made it clear that they're not going to negotiate at gunpoint. They will fight until the last Iranian, but they will never say yes to the imperialist power. Our main slogan is never to humiliation, and that we will fight until the last Iranian, but we will never surrender to the imperialist power. The reason Imam Khomeini, for example, called the US regime Great Satan, it's not only rhetorical, it comes from the lived experience of Iranians. Satan is known for being deceptive, for being satanic, being evil, for breaking its promises. We have seen how the United States attacked Iran during negotiations, how it has always breached international, deals and pacts and everything. It is exactly the file of Satan, and they resemble that. I mean, speakers were referring to victims of US bases and troops in the region, the raping of 9-month-old children. That's exactly the Epstein and Rothschild coalition that Iran is fighting against. And I think this is when, the world is waking up, and we have to raise this awareness and educate people about the different models of resistance against imperialism. Just find your indigenous response, incorporate your own values, and there you go. I mean, you have an example of Iran, who has been under sanctions for 4 decades, brutal sanctions that no one can even imagine, and still we're capable of bringing the imperialist power to its knees.
Thank you for those powerful words, Satare. I think I join many of the people who have mentioned already in the comments their solidarity and with the resistance of Iran and Iranian people, which is something that is, I think, giving us much inspiration across the world as we see U.S. imperialism, get to new heights. Next, we have Keiko with your closing remarks, please. Keiko, I think you are still muted.
Sorry. Thank you. I was looking forward to joining this webinar since, all the speakers are from the country that I'm interested in now. And I could learn a lot from their speeches, from their presentation. And I found that we share the kind of similar problems caused by the presence of U.S. military base now. And I kind of, noticed that we have several key words here. And Luna said, why is the important question to be asked? I don't know. Yeah, and I think, I agree with that. In order to seize the sense of the things, and in order to, grasp the structure of what is going on, question of why is important, I think. And also, many speakers often use the words, solidarity. And this word, in order to protect this precious thing, we have to think about, what we should do in this region. This kind of common important, values. And I also, I also think, it is important to dialogue, as I experienced through the dialogue, project that we had. And through that dialogue, first of all, we could understand each other. This is the first step to build up the peace, I think. And also, some people also mentioned, history repeats itself. So we should learn from the history, and we should think, not to make another mistake, what we should do. And that's kind of things I was thinking, listening to other people's, presentations. Thank you very much. It was a precious experience for me.
Thank you very much, Keiko-san. We'll be continuing this conversation definitely as we all learn together. So next we have Professor Tamisha. Could you give your final remarks, please? I think you are also muted.
Oh, sorry. I think this seminar is very important. And I'm so glad that I had the chance to meet all the speakers, particularly Satara from Iran. I mean, we've been watching, like at home, we've been watching all the videos or TV or everything about Iran, and we got angry. But then I got worried also about the Iranian people. So it was like a very good thing for me for us to get linked up. So that's one thing. And another thing is we got to share our local struggle or local analysis, and we find that there are many common things. And it seems to me we need to do a lot of class analysis. I mean, in each, like in Iran or in Taiwan or in China, that different classes of people are impacted or influenced by all the military bases or the ideological control. So I think this is quite important to do, for us to do, particularly like Trump or the U.S. or other countries. The leaders are having their own narratives, which is very different from ours. So we need to do a lot more class analysis. And another thing is, more related to this class analysis, I'm involved in a local struggle, and which is about protecting the island. And the island is taken by Japan with the support of the U.S. So I always feel that whether the Japanese people are having the same type of thinking like I am. But I was really very surprised when I last month I went to Tokyo and talked with the governmental officials, but I also talked with the activists who were involved in the civil movement, and I find that my thinking are very similar to theirs. So I think that someone talk about solidarity, solidarity between different classes of people are very important. So I would think that we should continue this kind of analysis. I mean, like, for today, 10 minutes, I can't, there's limited time. So, and I have a lot of things, like a lot of stories or a lot of work that I have done that I wanted to share. So, I mean, only one seminar is not enough. I think we should continue having this and then building up the solidarity among us. I mean, we are from each local area. I mean, we have a lot of work to do in each local area, but also we need to really link up. All us need to link up. So, and I do myself have the experiences of like linking up the different classes. I find real solidarity, even with myself, with Japanese people, we do have the solidarity. But with like their prime minister, this her name is Sakachi. She is really very much right-wing, and her narrative is very different from my or the people who are involved in local struggle. So I think it is very important that we talk. The people who are under this situation, we need to talk. We need to really link up. We need to build up the solidarity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is exactly the goal of such webinars, and we'll continue doing these in the future. Corazon, your last comments?
Well, so much has been said, and I've learned a lot today. I would like to say that. And, I appreciate the reflections that we are having. At the same time, what I can say is that, the history teaches us so much. And I think that, as Luna have mentioned, we need to know where we are. So that's one very important lesson I learned from my mentors. Context is very important, and also that we learn from the people, their experience, their stories, because that is where the inspiration is. For a person like me who went through a dictatorial regime in the 70s, there is so much to remember, but at the same time, there is also so much to inspire. And I think as we go through life, the problem does not change. It multiplies. It takes on a different image, different words, and sometimes our enemies actually use the words that we are using. So I think it's something that we need to take by heart, to learn this transformation that's happening, because the strategies that we adopt is dependent on a good reading and analysis of what's happening on the ground. Also, for me, it has been really an inspiration to be able to join, struggles in the front line, and that's why I am deeply grateful to friends and comrades who have been able to be part of my personal experience. And sometimes it's not actually the inside the classroom that we learn a lot, but it could be in the picket line, in the peace camp, and in the stories that we hear from women who have been denied of their life and capacity to be able to continue to live on. So it's this webinar has been really truly refreshing for me. It brings me memories of Vietnam, where as I said, gave me the political awakening when I was a student in the 70s. So I hope that we can continue on. I appreciate our friends in the International People's Assembly, who I've been a privilege to be part of, working together last year. Was it last year? Oh, yeah, last year. And, it's sometimes webinars like this, they can become boring. But if you have had experience with people at some point in your life, it stays with you. And I think it has been truly a good experience to be able to be part of what we did in Korea. And we kind of really take that on and continue the connections that as much as we can, so that we can build on that experience and we can build on our, making our struggle stronger. So hands off Asia.
Thank you, Corazon. I think that's a very important lesson. We hope that, just like you said, Vietnam was a politicizing moment for a generation, that this moment of heightened U.S. imperialism is also a politicizing moment for a new generation. So that's an important message for us, that we cannot just look at the pessimism and the negativity of what is, and the brutality of what's happening, but that we can organize a new generation. And I'm going to pass the last words to Chung-un to close us off with the final comments, please.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me this wonderful seminar, and good to see like familiar faces and also to see new faces here. And I think most of us agrees and knows the nature of the U.S. imperialism and how it impacts on our lives. And I think for like after the seminar, we have to think about how can we deliver this information, our experience to a general public. So I think it's important to mobilize people into the street, into the events that we can talk about international solidarity. So I think that can expand our power. And because these days, I think the international solidarity is very important to fight against the U.S. imperialism, because it explicitly show how it can damage to the people's lives and here and there and around the world. So I think it's a time for us to go out and meet people and talk about what we discussed within this webinar, and mobilize to them to the rallies, events, and etc. So thank you for inspiring talks, and I hope to see and hope to connect in different occasion, and hope to meet people here in somewhere around the world. Thank you all.
Thank you for that. So this comes to a wrap up. Of course, this webinar is the beginning of a discussion. We'll be hosting more on the Tricontinental Asia YouTube channel. We're trying to remember these historical dates like today as a memory and a call to action for a moment, because the peoples of Asia know the cost of war and peace and our liberation and independence. And with that spirit, we want to confront the difficulties of today. We also invite you all. This, of course, is a webinar together with the International People's Assembly. You can visit their website at IPA-AIP.org. There's lots of information about the campaign, resources, more information. You can download the posters in many, many Asian languages. You can print them, post them on social media. You can share with your organizations and post them in your communities. And throughout the year, Tricontinental Asia will be publishing different analysis, including hopefully from all of the speakers today, on the realities of U.S. militarism, but more importantly, the resistance to it. And you can find out more at the tricontinental.org/Asia. And I think, through this hard-earned history of Asia, I want to just bring in a quote from Ho Chi Minh or Bác Hồ to close us off. And he said that, 60 years ago, that nothing is more precious than independence and freedom. And so for today, for all of our peoples across the global south, but especially in Asia as a hotspot of this reality, independence and freedom means independence and freedom from U.S. military aggression and imperialism. So to close us off, I'm going to actually welcome you all who was in the webinar still. You've stayed with us for 2 hours. Turn on your camera, turn on your microphone, and I want us to all go hands off Asia together after the count of 3. So feel free to do that if you'd like. We can try it. We can't be together in one place, but let's try to be together virtually. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Hands up,
Hands off Asia.
Hands off Asia.
Hands off Asia.
Hands off
Hands off
Asia.
Asia.
Thank you
Hands
very
off
much,
Asia.
everyone. We will all be in touch. Stay in touch, and let's make sure that Hands Off Asia is something we can build across Asia and across the world. So thank you very much, and have a good night wherever you are.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
See you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you from Sri Lanka.
Thank you from Argentina.
Waiting again to meet from Sri Lanka.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
things. That's very good.
Oh,
Atul.
Hi, comrade. Very happy to see you. Thank you so much.
hello.
Hi, Surendra. Hi, everyone.
How
Thank
are
you so
you?
much. All good. Hopefully to see you all soon, next month or in a couple of months. This will be a regular feature. So yeah.
All right. Have a good night. I know it's quite late in some of the regions, so please take good care, and we'll be in touch soon. Appreciate it.